being a singer-songwriter, I get enormous inspiration from all the things around me. And particularly strong is my sense of family history, as indeed it was for my grandmother, who very much helped bring me up. I was asked in 2014 to put on a concert at the Church of the Annunciation in memory of my great uncle, Norman Somerset, who left Eton and joined the Grenadier Guards in 1912, and within a few days of landing on the European continent, he was killed at Ypres. And I was asked to put on a concert and to write a song in his memory. I familiarised myself with all his letters that he wrote from the trenches, and of course he joined the military because every generation in my family joined the military. And if I look at the family tree, which my grandmother used to show me, and of course as a child you invariably have very little interest in. It's only as you get older that you begin to appreciate. But I can see that here my great-great-great-grandfather was born Fitzroy Somerset, Lord Fitzroy Somerset, and he was the youngest son of the 5th Duke of Beaufort. And he joined the army and became ADC to Wellington. And of course, as Lord Raglan, he commanded the Allied forces in the Crimea. If we go up some generations, we've got the Dukes of Beaufort, and if I just pick out some interesting ones, John Beaufort, who was the illegitimate son of the John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster. John, the Duke of Lancaster, had a formal marriage to daughter of the King of Castile, but his real love was Catherine, and John Beaufort was born illegitimate. Now, there was an act of Parliament to create him legitimate, and indeed the Pope at the time ruled that John Beaufort was legitimate. John of Gaunt was the son of Edward III, and his father, Edward II, who was murdered at Berkeley Castle, and then his father was Edward I, Henry III, wicked King John, who of course is buried he lies in state in Worcester Cathedral, his father, Henry II. And so quite a history of soldiers and sailors. And that was really partly the reason that I decided to join the Royal Navy. Well, much to my surprise, I learned a few years ago that there was another musician in the family, and that was Garrett Wesley, who was the father of the Duke of Wellington. And Garrett Wesley was my 5th great-grandfather, and he was Professor of Music at Trinity College, Dublin. His son was not so keen on the violin, although apparently he was a fine violinist. He chose to join the army and made his mark, particularly in the Peninsular Campaign. Now, before he went into battle, it was common practice to give a lock of hair to someone that you cared for. He cared for his niece, my great-great-great-grandmother, Emily Wellesley Pole, who married Lord Raglan. And in 1813, he gave her this rather charming gold and diamond encrusted bracelet with a lock of his hair. And that to me is very special. It's been passed down the generations since then. He gave her a further lock of his hair in 1837. And by then, of course, he was very well known, and people loved to make caricatures of him. So here is, you can see they're making fun of his beaked nose. And my grandmother, Blanche Lonsdale, was the last generation to enjoy his beaked nose. And here you see Wellington as an old man. And so it's quite nice to have these wonderful things in his memory. I'm now going to talk about Lord Raglan, and he was born Lord Fitzroy Somerset. He was the youngest son, I believe the 9th son of the 5th Duke of Beaufort, who had 12 children. So he was brought up at Badminton. He joined the army and was sent out as ADC to a general. Luckily for him, it was Wellington, and he joined Wellington in the Peninsular Campaign, which was very successful. And he learnt a lot very quickly. In fact, he and Wellington served together for some 40 years, and invariably they never parted. Wellington trusted his young ADC and introduced him to his niece, Emily Wellesley Pole, and of course they married. Now here you've got his early jewellery box, which is inscribed Lord Fitzroy Somerset, and if I open it up, Fitzroy had a telescope made, and this was effectively made by the best maker in the day, who was called Berge. And Berge took over the business of Ramsden. Ramsden had been much respected, and you can see it's a brass telescope inscribed Lord Fitzroy Somerset. This was made in about 1810, and if I pull out the telescope, you can see that everything opens, and this Fitzroy would have taken with him everywhere he served. So he had it at Wellington's side during the Peninsular Campaign. He also would have had it on the battlefield of Waterloo. And if I put it to my eye, the most extraordinary thing is that it still works absolutely perfectly and zooms me into every detail of London life. So that really is rather special. He was quite romantic, Lord Raglan. This is a brooch that he gave his wife. His soldiers on the battlefield loved him very much. They made for him 2 walking sticks. And this one was made from the apple tree immediately outside his headquarters in the Crimea. So by this stage, Raglan was quite an old man to be sent out in charge of the French, Turkish and British army. And the horses would be tied to this apple tree when they went to visit Raglan. His first battle in the Crimea was a great success. It was the Battle of Inkerman in November 1854, and the walking stick is inscribed at the top. So I had great fun polishing it yesterday. It probably hasn't been polished since it was out in the Crimea. This other stick of Raglan's I think is very special, and it even has a spent cartridge, because of course soldiers making the stick would have had to use local resources, and so here I don't know if you can see, but is a spent cartridge that they've used to protect it, and that Raglan would have used probably on the battlefield, given his age. One other thing that he gave his daughter Charlotte was his prayer book, and I think probably this prayer book travelled with him. It's very beaten up, and he's inscribed it to his daughter Charlotte. So that's rather a nice thing to have. Sadly, Raglan was leading a successful campaign in the Crimea, in pushing the Russians out of the Crimea. The siege of Sebastopol eventually was a success, but unfortunately Raglan died out there. And when he died, General Malakoff, who was in charge of the French army, went into Raglan's headquarters, into his bedroom, and Malakoff cried like a baby. And he went and picked local flowers, and he called them the fleurs des immortels, so immortal flowers. And I don't know whether you can see, but he put a wreath of these immortal flowers on the coffin of Raglan, and these ones he sent to Lady Raglan in England, and obviously that meant a tremendous amount to her. So that's rather special, and they've survived to today. And then finally for Raglan, I've got his hair that he gave his wife each time that he went away to fight.
For glory, goodbye, my dearest Mama, I'll soon be back again. And to my little sister, keep good, grow old and pretty. And as for my first love, you'll be in my thoughts all day.
When Lord Raglan died in the Crimea in 1855, Florence Nightingale said to her parents that it was impossible not to love him. I did, she said. He was a very good man. Now, Lord Raglan's grandson is actually Arthur Somerset, and Arthur is one of my relations. He's my great-grandfather, who was very musical, and he was great friends with Arthur Sullivan. And when Gilbert and Sullivan were writing one show a year for this Savoy Theatre. He had an arrangement with his friend Arthur that he could have a box whenever he wanted, and he could sing all the scores off the book. And this is Arthur, not actually in his rifle brigade uniform, but in his operatic military uniform. And here I have a portrait of his wife as a young girl. She lived in Lowndes Street in Knightsbridge, and they wrote fabulous letters, love letters, which I have to each other. So it was a great romance. Now, of course, they had 2 children. One was Norman Somerset, who was born in 1894, and the other was my grandmother, Blanche, born in 1905.
Please write me letters every day to help me through the day. The General says we'll be back soon, who send them on their way. I'll take my leave and be with you, just watch and I'll return. But if I should not come home again, remember me each day.
Arthur and Louis Somerset, their boy, Norman, leaves Eton and immediately joins the Grenadiers. And one of the first things on joining the military is to be equipped with a sword, and he would have bought this in Piccadilly, and it's just had its first polish in many years, but it's a very nice thing to have. And he joined and obviously had to train, so this was in 1912, and he went to Worley to do his training. Whilst he was at Worley, he made great friends with the Prince of Wales, and the Prince of Wales took this photograph of Norman Somerset at Worley. So they were young lieutenants serving together. And this actually says Norman Somerset, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, taken by HRH, the Prince of Wales, at Worley in August 1914.
Always know the time for you until my dying day. I write this letter, it may be my last. Take care of all from here. I hope to return with honor and glory. To marry you will be together forevermore.
We have a book full of letters from Queen Mary to my great-grandparents, and particularly relevant is a nice letter from the Prince of Wales to my great-uncle Norman, and this is in September. It's September the 1st, 1914. The Prince of Wales writes, from Wellington Barracks, my dear Norman, I hope you got my message about dinner tonight. It was a bore but could not be helped, for we had a party here I didn't know about. We had a long day at Richmond, marching there and back with a field day at half-time. So we came back rather beat, and Flick, Toby and I had a capital bathe at the Bath Club. It was mighty warm marching. I don't know if I shall see you tomorrow, as we are going to Purfleet with the King's Company reservists at 6:40 in the morning to shoot. However, we must fix up another night. So long, yours ever, Edward.
My darling, keep on reaching out, will feel your presence there. Until I die, I love you so, and forevermore. Remember me as I said today, for a foreign joy. I'll try and make you proud of me in battles away.
The Prince of Wales takes some photographs. There's actually one of the Prince of Wales at Worley. There's one that he took of Norman Somerset, my great uncle, and his friends. And of course, that is September. Who would have thought that a month later, Norman Somerset would be killed in action? And being a tall, I think he was 6'6", and the officers were picked off by snipers because they were always told to shoot the tallest person. And he was shot in the left eye. Well, amongst the letters here from Queen Mary, she writes to my great-grandfather on the death of his son, Norman Somerset. She says, "Dear Captain Somerset, I feel so much distressed at the sad death of your only son that I must send you and your wife a few lines to express my warmest sympathy." And this is sent from York Cottage, Sandringham.
And if I die a hero, just always know I loved you forever until my dying day. I love you forever until my dying day.
It's quite a long letter, but she finishes it. "The King joins me in offering you both our deepest sympathy, and I remain yours very sincerely, Mary R." So what was quite extraordinary is when Norman Somerset was killed on the 23rd of October 1914, the brother of my grandmother, she was to go on and marry my grandfather, Leopold Lonsdale. We all knew him as Leo, and he had a brother, James Raymond Lonsdale, and he was actually killed 6 days after Norman. And I think that gave them a tremendous bond when they were married. They'd both suffered the loss of a dear sibling. So my grandfather, Leo, decided he would make his life the Grenadiers. And he signed up and intended to make a full career in the army. I have his sword stick Forgive me, I'm not an army man, I'm a naval man, so I'm not quite sure what the official name for it is, but I call it a sword stick, and it has his name, and that would have been part of an officer's uniform. My father, when he was at school, he volunteered to join the army as early as he could to take part in the Second World War. So my father, Norman Lonsdale, joined the family regiment, the Grenadiers. You can see here his bust by Graham Healy. What was nice is that my grandmother named my father Norman after her brother.
Stands the test that lays upon the altar the dearest and the best, the love that never falters, the love that pays the price, the love that lays undaunted the final sacrifice.
After the Second World War, he then went on with my mother to form the World Record Club in the 1950s, and they enjoyed tremendous creative success in the records that they recorded during the 1950s and the 60s, including all the West End shows, the Shakespeare plays, putting Beatrix Potter to music, and even using Sir Laurence Olivier to read the famous Bible stories. So obviously, with all these ancestors who had been in the army, it was a bit of a shock to my grandparents when I announced that I was breaking the family tradition, that I had decided to join the Royal Navy. And I spent a very happy year at Dartmouth in 1979, and that included 3 months touring the Mediterranean on board HMS Fearless, and then a year on the sub-lieutenant's course, which included time at sea on board HMS Fife, hurricane relief duty. As a sub-lieutenant, I served in Northern Ireland, and I was very proud that our team was given the Wilkinson Sword of Peace for the efforts that we made to try and create the peace that is enjoyed today. And my 5th year in the Navy, my final year, I was very fortunate to be invited to repair a board for interview with 3 commanders and the Admiral, Paul Greening. And there were 3 seasonal officers chosen each year, and we joined Britannia. I had to train as a diving officer because the yacht needed one, and that meant spending 5 hours a day in February in a very cold freshwater lake in Portsmouth. And we sailed around the world, taking Her Majesty to islands of the Commonwealth that she had previously not visited. They were very happy memories. Each officer would be given a scrapbook, and it was lovely to basically have all these as a record of our time travelling around the world.
Eternal Father, strong to save, who sought us by the restless wave, who leads the mighty ocean deep, its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. the